Talking Point Live. It's November 2nd, and we're coming to you from the campus of Dixie State University here in the Holland Library Building. I'm Jennifer Kohler, and this is my cohort.
I am Eric Young, coming to you live from the campus of Dixie State University on this fine Wednesday morning, 6 days away from the election.
From you know what? Right. Right, the big day.
What kind of meridian in time is that going to be, do you think?
Well, I think it's going to be significant for sure.
Yeah,
and by the way, I decided to vote early. And one reason I did is because we have a polling station here on our campus this year, and I wanted to support having a polling station, so I got to go in and vote yesterday. And
absolutely, you can go through and look at that on social media, #DixieVotes. The polling station is right in the Gardner Center, and I would encourage you to go through and do the same thing, because I must admit that I voted as well.
That's right, you weren't going to. You were determined not to.
I thought I'd take a stand and say, don't vote, fight against the establishment, because if you vote, that's a support for the corruption that's going on. I said that about 4 shows ago, and now I'm eating my words gladly, because I really just can't stand to not do anything about it.
Right,
so,
right.
So I slept well last night, having voted.
Good.
We both actually went and voted at the same time. So
we were talking about this program. That's what we were doing.
Yep.
And
We were talking about what we're going to be talking about today, being the concept of empathy, and then we walked over, voted, and so here we are.
Right. And I'm not going to say who I voted for. I'm just going to say my vote to me is sacred, and I refuse to vote for somebody I don't respect or trust. I'll leave it at that.
You feel better having said that?
Yes,
now?
yeah.
Okay.
I had to say that.
Right.
Because too many people are saying, oh, you have to vote for so-and-so because we're afraid, or we hate the other person.
So this was not a fear-motivated vote for you?
Nope.
Yeah, it was not for me either. So we're talking about empathy today, which is an interesting topic when it comes to such a divided idea in terms of being a conservative versus being a liberal, and what that means. This is your idea, and you're introducing this because, from a voter standpoint, or when's this empathy thing supposed to kick in for us?
Yes, well, okay, I read an article from the Land of Sacrifice. It was written by a researcher, and she considered herself, well, she's a Berkeley professor, considers herself a liberal, and she decided she was going to try to figure out why intelligent, well-meaning people could feel so differently about what reality is and what's the right decision.
Can I stop you right there?
Yes.
Now, Jen used the L word, okay? She called this individual was from Berkeley and is a liberal. So if you, while watching this, automatically thought, well, anything else that Jen says about this person doesn't count because she's talking about a liberal, might be a sign on your part of an automatic attitudinal default and the fact that maybe you are incapable of empathy at this point.
Okay, or you're going to shut down your empathy.
You're going to shut down the empathy.
Right, you're going to switch that off.
Okay, so I'm going to be a little parenthetical commentator over here.
You go ahead. Right. Interrupt at will.
Okay, go ahead.
Just go for it.
So I'll pick it up.
So anyway, she decided to do a 5-year study in Louisiana. And you know, it's interesting. I started thinking about, she said she picked Louisiana because it was one of the most consistently red states in the country.
Now we've lost the liberals on the program.
Well, you're implying that liberals are not interested in understanding how conservatives think?
Right.
Oh, why wouldn't they want to know?
Well, I'm just playing into the lack of empathy idea. Keep going.
Yes.
So she did a study in Louisiana, the red state.
She wanted to
blue
understand.
Lady in a red state.
Right, and so she wanted to get into their heads, is what she said, get into their thinking process and spend some time. And so I started thinking, that's a major thing that we're lacking in our system right now, is the ability to be empathic listeners or empathetic listeners, to have empathy with another point of view. We have become very entrenched in a limited and well-defined point of view, and afraid actually to get outside of it. So what's so scary about empathy, and how is that different from sympathy? Since we're college professors, we like to define words, right, and make distinctions.
Okay, all right.
So let's start with what's the difference between, what is empathy, and what's the difference between empathy and sympathy? Okay. You go ahead, answer.
Well, I define empathy, a lot of people define empathy as the ability to go through and feel what somebody else is feeling. And I'm of the opinion that that's not entirely possible. We can't actually feel what somebody else is feeling, but we can try to. And so empathy is the attempt at trying to understand or feel what the other person is
and
feeling.
using our human imagination to do so, which just makes us distinct from all other animals.
We have to be
right?
provisional. We have to be open-minded. We have to take off any kind of barriers that might be around our thinking to be able to go through and be empathic with somebody else.
Right. So how's empathy different than sympathy?
Well, no, you define sympathy.
Okay, well, sympathy is when you can also relate and share the other person's feelings, but you make a judgment along with those.
Oh, that's
so you're
interesting.
buying into their grievance, you're buying into the injustice that was done to them, you feel sorry for them. So there's a judgment along with the ability to relate to their feelings.
So pity would be that judgment part?
Pity would be a form of a
That's
judgment, like they should never have done that to you, poor you, or you have a right to feel the way you do, and so on. Empathy is just being able to understand it.
Or making the effort
and
to.
relate to it, right?
Okay.
And sympathy is buying into it or making a judgment
All right.
attached.
So what's the opposite? What's the antithesis, do you think, of empathy?
Well, let's see.
Or what drives the opposite of empathy?
Well, I think fear. I think fear. And, you know, I was telling you earlier that I read something very interesting. Well, one of Jonathan Haidt's essays called The Politics of Disgust. And he was saying that as humans, and this is going back to our biological roots, basically, in our early evolution, humans are trying to avoid being contaminated with poisons, toxins, scary things, you know, that would make us ill, and also contamination of our society and culture.
Okay, let me stop you there then. So contamination is a pretty strong word.
Right.
We talked about this earlier this morning. What do you mean by the fear of being contaminated? So are we just talking pathologically, or are we talking in other terms as well? So I'm afraid I'm a germaphobe. Go ahead, you're fine.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too close to you because I might get you germs, but I don't want to get too close to you because I might get the way you think as well. You might rub off on
Absolutely,
it.
yeah. So that idea of protecting oneself extends from just the biological protection of germs that can make you very sick and kill you, to the contamination of other people's ideas that can get in your brain and infect your brain, and then kill your sense of who you are, or your membership in a group.
But so hate says this is kind of hate. Is that an
Fear.
No, the author
Jonathan Haidt,
H-A-I-D-T, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So this is kind of a natural human default.
It is. It's a survival mechanism.
Okay. So what about the natural human default to find connection? Because we have that as well.
Right.
So do we have this kind of paradox of feelings going on all the time?
We're actually.
I want to get to know you, but I don't want to get your illness.
Right. So we have this war, if you will, going on inside of us that says we want to be connected to the other humans around us. We want to make contributions to them.
What do you have hanging out your ear?
It's a cowboy.
No, you have.
Oh, I forgot to
take
that out.
Do you have an IFB?
No. I'm actually getting prompted
right,
from,
yeah, we can't. Just so you know, nobody prompts us. The views and opinions expressed on the show are solely those of us, not CEC or Dickey State University.
I thought you meant my cowboy
earrings.
earring.
Had this thing. No, I love your cowboy earrings. But
no, I was listening earlier to my phone.
I interrupted you.
Okay, that's okay. So where was I?
Contamination versus connection.
Right. So
there's an alliteration
we
for
want to be, as humans, we want to be connected to one another and make contributions to each other. But we're fighting this against the fear of being contaminated. So I think that's one reason why we're having some of the emotional responses around this particular election cycle, is because we're cutting ourselves off from other points of view, but we want to be connected to other people.
Well, that's such an amazing idea in terms of human conflict, because on the one hand, we're like, stay away from me. On the other hand, well, I still want to have something meaningful with you. I just don't want to have to agree with you in order to reach that.
So that's where you can be empathetic, but not sympathetic with another point of view.
Wow.
Yeah. It's okay, but you know what? There are small, very well organized minorities in our political landscape that make it scary if you, in your little group, if you are seen to be as someone who is willing to collaborate or work with the other side, you can be ostracized.
You can be.
You can be, and you can be persecuted by your own supposed group.
Are there other groups, though, that have created maybe the empathy machine to make it chic or popular, to maybe get on the bandwagon as well?
I don't know. Do you know of somebody?
I'm trying to come up with something there to go through and counteract what is it you're talking about.
Well, I will say that I was...
Let me have you move forward.
Yeah, just listening to a book about Olympia Snow. She's written about herself, and she prided herself as a Republican member of the U.S. Congress, first as in the House of Representatives, and then as a senator, her legacy is bipartisan collaboration.
So what was Olympia able to do within that collaboration?
I'm not to the end of the book yet. I don't know, because she's just barely running for office, but she's talking about her experience in the Maine legislature.
But there was an achievement there somewhere along the line, some level of collaboration that she was able to reach.
She said in the state legislature, when she was in the Senate there, that they worked together, both parties, and hammered out problems and came up with solutions together.
Okay, now here's where I'm going to stir it up a little bit. Was it because Olympia is a woman?
Oh, well...
because of her gender? Was she able to be more able to reach that level of working together as opposed to maybe guarding her position and going against what's being proposed?
You know, I'm reluctant to make a big generalization, but I do think that women are socialized and maybe even biologically inclined to be empathic and to be collaborative.
More so than men.
Men have to go out there and kill the tigers, so they cannot be empathetic, or they have to kill the warring tribes. So they can't stop and say, gee whiz, I see that you also have a family at home that you're defending, but I have to bash you on the head anyway. Sorry. So I do think that because
have we made any progress since we were bashing people over the head?
It's hard to overcome that wiring, I think.
Really?
Yeah, I think, well, in sports, look at sports. It's all about bashing on the head again.
Okay.
You know, and annihilating the opponent, and, you know, crushing them and defeating them and dismembering them and tearing them limb from limb, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So maybe we haven't come that far as how empathic men get to be. I mean, maybe they don't get to be empathic.
Wow, talk about a generalization there. You're trying to avoid generalizations, and you just come out and say men don't get to be empathic.
Yeah, I think society, well, look at men, I think America...
They're not allowed to be empathic, is what you're saying.
I'm saying society, and look how society conditions men.
Right.
And I will say that American men, here I go again.
Forward.
I'm getting far forward. I'm progressive. See, I'm just progressing right across the floor.
See, now we just lost everybody in our audience at that point.
But, you know, I was thinking when you were talking about men being allowed to be empathic, that American men, I think, are the best deal on the planet. And I'm not saying that to be a kiss-up either. I really believe that. I'm looking at other cultures around the world, men in the Middle East, men in Europe, men in, South America, and I think American men are the most enlightened, as a group and as a culture. I prefer, where I live, for sure.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could go that far in comparison to what else is going on. There are other cultures around there that are matriarchies and that kind of thing. But that notwithstanding, so what you and I have talked about before, and what we're trying to define here is that maybe not everybody is completely capable of this level of empathy. That women might be more predisposed to an empathic approach, especially in problem solving or in issues this way, even politically, than men are, because men are more boxed in their thinking. They're one subject at a time, and this is driven by testosterone and brain systems, where women are more big picture. Obviously, they are the nurturers as well within society, and so have maybe a greater ability of becoming empathic. Is that?
I think so too.
Agreeable?
I think so too, and I will say, I was going to end with this, but since you're leading into it now, I was going to say, I would really encourage women to look in the mirror and say, where can I serve in a leadership role in my community, in my neighborhood, in my church, in my work, in my government? Where can I...
At my university?
Yeah, at my work, right, at my university. Where can I serve in leadership? Because we have half the population made up of women, but not half the population of leaders are not made up of women. So if you're a man and you love women, you love a woman, a sister, a mom, a daughter, a wife, support women in seeing themselves as leaders and in having the opportunities to be leaders, because I really do think they bring a quality to decision making of collaboration that is not being manifested now in a lot of leadership situations, especially politics.
Well, I hope you do bring that back at the end of the show as well, that same call out there. If you don't, I will. Putting that there. I think it's interesting that there have been roughly 100 years between women's emancipation, women's freedom to vote, and now. 100 years to the point where we actually have a female running for president. There are 100 years.
You're saying that's a long time.
That's an awful long time.
Yes.
Between.
But
And I'm not saying that, I don't think that's really on the part of women at all. Obviously, the man has been in power for that amount of time.
100 years in terms of evolution isn't very long. Think about that. Because
Yeah,
we've
but,
been around as human beings for a really long time. So 100 years is just a blip.
Social progressiveness, though,
Yeah.
100 years is a century.
That was profound, for sure. Yes,
I just couldn't wait to get
we
that
can
line
agree
out.
on that. Yes, 100 years. Yes, but
It's an
I think
awful long time,
I think in terms of evolution, it's maybe not such a long time.
But
Yeah.
but we're not talking about evolution. We're talking about social progression.
I'm talking about evolution
I don't understand why.
because I'm me and you're you,
Okay,
and
right.
that's a manifestation
that's-
of the separate universes
that's
we
what
all
you
live
think.
in. Yes. All right.
That might be true in your world.
Well, let's move on to the 5 moral roots.
Well, hold on a minute. Before we get into that, I want to talk about a little anecdote.
Okay.
Sorry, we're chasing the shadow as we go, and everybody needs to pull focus one more time. There, as we go.
If you move, I have to move. That's the way it works.
So we're talking about empathy. Where am I? Over here at the beginning of, during the week. And so I had this exchange happen to me last month, just 2 days ago, where I took my vehicle into a shop to have some work done. And the vehicle I drive is kind of a
macho
vehicle. It's a Hummer, and it's an H3, and it has some stuff on it that makes it, that I use off-road. Anyway, so when he sees that, he makes certain assumptions about who I am and my politics and what I might be thinking. And I made a friend almost instantly with this individual, who is a very large individual, long beard. Within the first 30 seconds, outed that he is former military, that he's a survivalist, and so on and so forth. And over the course of about 45 minutes in exchange, if not an hour, I heard his entire politic. I heard how he parents. I heard the whole bit, right? And very little of which would I ever agree with. But I just shut up and I just listened and I mean really listened, like ask questions and get clarification, that kind of thing. And at the end of our exchange, he says, "It's so nice to be able to connect with somebody and
who thinks like I do."
Who thinks
right?
like I do? Yeah. And I thought, oh, wow. Well, I'm glad you feel that way. And I guess maybe there's a little bit of empathy on just in terms of just even listening to the guy and allowing him without having any kind of defensives and saying, well, you're wrong and I disagree with you on this and so on. And then just yesterday, I'm talking with somebody else who is extolling the virtues of Hillary Clinton and talking about her platform. And again, I didn't say anything. I listened, I nodded my head and offered a little bit of clarification. And at the end, I got the same response. Gee, it's nice to connect with somebody who agrees with me. Well, is that really all it takes, just to listen? Is that enough of an attempt at empathy to go through and just shut up and listen?
Well, it is interesting that you had an insight for a brief moment into 2 really different points of view. And because you were willing to listen and suspend your judgment and condemnation during that conversation, you let those people connect with you. They felt connected to you because you were listening to them.
Well, and I learned a lot
Yes.
about both these individuals in a very short period of time.
Right. So I think that was a really valuable thing. And I think we need more listening going on, not only in our personal lives. I teach interpersonal communication, and listening is a really big factor in our relationships. But I think that applies just as much in our large relationships as a society and among leaders. Being a good listener is a prime quality of being a good leader.
On that note,
Okay.
not that I wasn't listening to you and thinking
Right.
about what I'm going to say next.
But okay.
But I was. But I
you
do
were.
appreciate that call
Yeah.
out. If you have something to add to our conversation, please feel free to comment on Facebook, facebook.com/TalkingPointLive. I guess if you weren't already there, you would know that. But I am monitoring the channel, and I will see if anything comes up that way, and I'll be glad to add your comments into our conversation. So, what about the 5 moral roots
of basically decision making? But again, Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, has done very many presentations, and one is a TED Talk called The 5 Moral Roots of, I think, Decision Making. But it really helps understand it. So what we could do is a little role play here. One of us can be a liberal, and one of us can be a conservative.
You be the liberal.
I'll be the liberal? Okay, I love that you let me be the liberal. Basically, I have that personality type anyway. Okay, so if I'm a liberal and you're a conservative, we agree on 2 out of 5 things, or we share these in common. Okay, the first thing we share in common is our love of fairness. Agreed? conservative person?
Sure.
You're a fan of fairness, and so am I, as a liberal. Okay, another thing we tend to share in common is, we both care about watching out for, caring, compassion, preventing harm to others.
Sure.
Okay, so both.
So the well-being
Yes.
is something important
Now,
to both sides.
As a conservative, there are 3 other moral values that you have that are very important to you to a degree, that are less
So
important to me.
I have these values as a conservative, and you don't, or?
Well, to a lesser degree.
To a lesser degree.
I don't rate them as highly as you.
So is Haight saying that conservatives have more values?
They have a 5-channel, he calls it, a 5-channel moral compass,
Whereas
whereas
liberals only have
tend to be relying on the first 2 of fairness and compassion.
2 to 5. This is a
Yes.
little unbalanced then, don't you think?
Well, you could look at it that way, but what are the other
so here you
3,
go.
Mr. Conservative,
Okay, go
that
ahead.
you prize that I don't?
I
as much?
prize authority.
Right, you are more loyal to authority than I am. As a liberal, I'm thinking to myself, and I was the oldest child, so I had a little alpha in me, right? The oldest child, or I think, we need to confront authority a little bit. We don't need to knuckle under to authority. And this idea of loyalty, sure, it's a good thing, but it's not going to override. So, but how do you feel about it as a conservative?
As a as a true conservative, I feel that
Now,
leadership should be limited.
Well, now you're talking as a political government. I'm talking as
I'm sorry, but what were we talking about before?
Well, we're not going to limit ourselves to just that.
See, this is the contradiction that I see in Haight's model, and I'm being critical here in going through and say, well, yeah, conservatives value leadership. I think they do value strong leadership, but not a plethora of leadership. They want it very limited. They want it very focused in order for them to go through
so
and
you're
have
talking
any
about
trust
the
within that.
size of leadership.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, but as a conservative, you fully will espouse loyalty to the leader. Whereas a liberal, I'm a little bit more likely to be critical and to question.
To be critical of that.
Right. You're going to be more loyal than me.
Okay.
It's going to be higher on your list.
According to the model.
Yes,
but
according to Haight's model.
I don't know that I agree with Haight in terms of that.
All right. Now, as far as...
so what's his own predisposition?
Haight's?
Politically, yeah.
Oh, well, I think he doesn't, he's not really blatant about it, but I think he would, I'm just guessing, but I think he would paint himself as more of a liberal thinker.
Okay, right.
Yeah, now, another point of view is, let's see, there was 4 and 5, so one of them had to do with purity. Okay, and what was the 4th one? I wrote it down. I'm totally blanking it out now.
Before we go to the 4th one, let's talk about the concept of purity. Now, you're talking about, so this is a conservative idea
I know.
that's espoused more than liberals take a look at that, purity. So this is not contaminated.
Oh, but you know what? As a liberal, I'm into purity too, but it might be more like in terms of what I eat. Like, have you noticed a lot of people, they won't eat anything that's not organic?
You're perpetuating a total stereotype here.
Okay, really? Well, why don't you do a survey?
Because those liberals are those tree-hugging, granola-eating,
you do a survey of the liberals
GMO-avoiding.
Find out how they feel about GMOs, right? And how dedicated they are to their healthy eating, okay? How it's sometimes a religious purification.
Again, you're getting very generalized here with a very broad brush.
I'm going with Haight's model.
Trying to establish Haight's model. And I'm just going through.
I will say that I conflated loyalty and authority. Okay, so loyalty is separate from authority.
Okay, hold on to that.
Okay.
Hold on, because we're not done with purity yet here. Because you're avoiding the question that I'm going to be asking.
Okay, I'm going to listen now. Ask.
So when it comes to the concept of purity, what comes to most minds has to do with worthiness, does it not? You're standing before God or before your fellow man and how good you are. Does that not speak to, do conservatives espouse that concept of purity more than liberals do?
Okay.
Those godless liberals?
You are adding something that can come after purity, but I'm going back to that anti-contamination where we don't want to get sick. We don't want to be contaminated. I think purity harkens back to preventing contamination.
So conservatives would rather truncate the connection with human beings and preserve their own sanctity by not getting contaminated by other ideas?
They're going to be less open to new ideas, yes.
Less empathetic.
They're going to be more careful about preserving purity. Yes.
Whereas liberals then would what?
It's like, oh, revolution's great, change is great, open's great, diversity's great. Come on, bring it on.
Isn't this hysterical to see her respond this way?
I'm just saying that's the characterization that Hate's offering.
Because all of that was in air quotes too while you were doing that.
All right. Pick on me as you will. Okay, so anyway, so when we talked about authority and loyalty, right?
Yeah.
So authority is one thing where we believe in being subjected to a righteous authority or a good authority and following the leader. Okay, wait a minute, I'm the liberal. You should be explaining this as
righteous
a conservative.
Authority. Okay, I'll play the part here.
Okay.
But I'll lose some friends along the way.
Anyway, the thing to notice, and I was telling you this early, I myself, okay, and maybe you can reveal a little bit about yourself too, but I have the personality of a liberal. I was the oldest kid, like I said. I'm used to getting my voice out there and being heard. I'm used to getting my way, and I'm open to like change, and I like new things. And I moved around a lot as a kid, so I never did learn a school song. I never got loyal to any school. I don't have the fan instinct, okay? But I grew up in a conservative religious tradition. So I feel a little schizophrenic sometimes. How about you?
Well, I feel that you're a little schizophrenic sometimes too.
Okay. Do you want to analyze?
How about me and my background?
Yes.
Well, very quickly, I was raised in a relatively conservative environment.
Okay.
My mother was the liberal in the home, I think, in terms of social ideas, social constructs. My father certainly was not. I grew up being a staunch conservative up until a certain point in my life when I turned 180 degrees and shed that and embraced what most people would consider to be more liberal ideas, what I consider to be more progressive ideas.
Okay.
But that's where it's at.
All right. So we want to end on.
Well, we have the 5 ideas, though. Do you want to finish that up? Because we're leaving our audience hanging.
Well, I think if our audience is actually curious about this idea, they can go to Hate's site.
Do we have an audience?
Yeah, John Haidt, right?
You.
All right. If we ever get an audience and they're curious about Jonathan Haidt, you can go look it up on TED Talks.
Okay, it's a good TED Talk to get into there.
Yeah.
The point I'm trying to get into is to get away from whitewashing or broad brushing individuals. If you want to be empathic, you cannot go through and evaluate. Evaluation is the carcinogen to your ability.
You mean like judge?
Exactly, to your ability to be empathic with anybody. So you can't go through and say, oh, well, I'm talking to Jen, but she's a conservative, so she's going to have this framework around everything that I'm going to say. And while I've been playing the devil's advocate with that all show long, I've done that for a reason, and that is, if that's a conversation that we have happening within our brains while we're trying to be empathic with somebody, we're never going to be there. We're never going to make it.
Okay, and so we'll never have access to understanding the other point of view, really.
You have to be provisional. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to be contaminated on whatever level that's going to take you in order for you to advance the whole notion of civility. And after this Tuesday, regardless of what happens, whoever receives the mantle of leadership and authority for the United States of America, we are going to need to learn how to become more empathic.
That's a good point.
Now's your time to plug.
Okay, and perspective. I just wanted to end on this. Okay, we don't live in Russia. I just finished reading 2 books about Putin's Russia. Okay, we don't live in Venezuela.
We might
I have a son-in-law from there, and they're
Wednesday.
next Thursday. I think they have a big march on the palace. Okay,
oh, really?
On the verge of civil war. That's right. And we don't live in Saudi Arabia. And back to women in leadership. Okay, women have the right to vote now in Saudi Arabia and are running for office, and you cannot believe the constraints they're under. It's just mind-boggling. They're not even allowed to drive a car or to go out in public without a male guardian. Okay, so we live in the United States of America. We have our problems. It's kind of scary sometimes, but it's going to be okay.
I was going to start singing the national anthem underneath what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Get out and vote. If you're a student here on campus, you can do that right here on campus. Faculty, staff, anybody, get over to the Gardner Center and vote if you haven't registered. you can certainly go through and get your provisional ballot and get it all done. There's no lines, which is great considering last election cycle, presidential election cycle. My family and I waited almost an hour and a half in line to go through and vote.
Gosh.
So no lines here. Nice people, great volunteers over there taking care of things. So get out and vote. Hashtag Dixie Votes. Take a look so you can see where all that is happening. That's it for Talking Point Live. Next time we come to you, we're going to have a different president a different president-elect of the United States.
And I'm so glad you repented about the not voting
thing.
thing.
Me too. I feel better about that.
Good job.
We'll see you next Wednesday, 9 o'clock here on Facebook, Talking Point Live. Thanks for joining us.